So I may be one of the very few people who bothered to watch this show on Paramount Plus. I've also noticed that since watching it, critics and audience scores alike have plummeted, so I guess I should have waited longer before giving it a go one late November night. This show made me mad. It made me mad because it missed the oh so obvious point of this television genre of murder mysteries and thrilling scandals and affairs, and became the worst thing it could be. Boring. So I'm gonna have a drink, and I'm gonna have a rant. And then I'm going to invite you into my annoyed little mind to figure out where the hell the killing kind went wrong. First, the plot. I beg you not to waste hours of your life watching this show, so here's your basic recap of this pretty convoluted, drawn-out mess.
Ingrid Lewis speaking.
Ingrid, it's John.
He's twisted. You should not be calling me. Don't let him get to you again.
I'm worried you might be in danger.
Ingrid is a barrister who, 1 year prior, had an affair with a client. This client, John, by the way, was on trial for stalking and emotionally harassing his ex, and Ingrid got him off. And then she got him off. And then she ended it because she was engaged the whole time, and he stalked her for a bit. Now John's back and says someone's out to kill Ingrid. And then her best friend gets shoved in front of traffic and killed while using Ingrid's umbrella. So she teams up with John to try and figure out what's going on. There's a lot of detail to pad out this murder mystery and ongoing who's after Ingrid mystery. So I'm going to skirt over that best I can. For such a busy plot, the killing kind still manages to be very unengaging. In the end, it's revealed John's behind it all. Shocking, I know. It's this weirdly complex plot in which he pretended to be a dude wanting revenge on Ingrid for letting his brother's killer walk free. He used this online disguise to manipulate his ex and her brother to try to kill Ingrid and those close to her as revenge for humiliating them in their trials. Ingrid's just too good at her job and gets a lot of her guilty clients off as innocent, so it's revenge. So anyways, Emma, the ex, goes to kill Ingrid, finally, and Ingrid figures out John was behind it all, basically out of nowhere. We'll get to these big logic jumps later, and they kill John. So John's plan was to use this whole plot to get Ingrid to only trust him and get closer to her again. And it kind of worked because Ingrid isn't very bright, and neither is he because multiple times in the show, Ingrid is almost killed, but the power of plot armor tends to come out of nowhere to save her. Pretty dumb plan overall if she dies, but okay, John. You're a criminal mastermind, I guess. Casting. The biggest issue with the show is that I just couldn't believe the leading actors in their roles. Colin Morgan doesn't have the criminal charisma needed for the villainous role, and Emma Appleton plays her character stoic and cold, far too often to be likeable. And both of those mean I don't find either very sympathetic or fun to watch, which then makes the viewing experience worse. It feels insane to say Morgan doesn't have the charisma for the lead character, since he was Merlin for 5 years on the BBC, and I ate that show up during its run. He led that show into success with his cheeky smiles and charming portrayal of the young and legendary wizard. So I know he has charisma in him. Why did he decide to turn all that off for the show? A show that desperately needed a charismatic, sexy lead villain to make you understand why he would get away with so much. Think of why You is so successful. It's Penn Badgley oozing charm and genuine enthusiasm into every inch of his performance as Joe. He's a terrible person and a creep, but when he's making his excuses and stalking his victims, you can't help but feel for him a little bit, and understand why people fall under his spell so easily. Colin Morgan as John doesn't have the sinister vibe or the self-confidence to make a good villain. Even the one brief scene of him controlling Emma felt awkward, like he was mentally disconnected from the situation, as opposed to exercising his power and control over her. Presumably for his own satisfaction. While I appreciate the series might have been trying to make the argument that abusive people such as John can look like or be anyone, the series' depiction of him as a criminal mastermind and manipulator actually made me chuckle quite a bit over the course of the show, even though I could see the direction this was going from the beginning. Emma Appleton does okay with the role of Ingrid. She's not as obviously miscast, but she brings the absolute basics to the role. Like I said, Ingrid isn't very likable or sympathetic, even in her most vulnerable moments, and I questioned a few times what made her friends and love interests like her so much. She seemed to be a very self-involved workaholic. The writers even point this out a few times, I guess in an attempt to excuse the character from having any more dimensions. She even breaks into her ex-fiancé's mother's holiday home and gets annoyed when caught doing this by her ex-fiancé, who was then incredibly nice to her considering the circumstances. Despite spending 6 hours with Ingrid, I really couldn't tell you much about her other than that. Sure, she's headstrong and hardworking and doesn't seem to care for following the rules or the law, despite her profession. But that's also all under the umbrella of her life being threatened, so she has no forks left to give. Ultimately, I think this is a hard character to play because she's so damn selfish and cold most of the time, and Appleton's work was cut out for her. Editing. Oh my god. The editing. Before I jump into the main story issues with the show, I have to mention the infuriating and endless use of slow motion and flashbacks. And you guys know my feelings on excessive slow motion. So after the first 5 improper uses, I knew I was in for a ride. Slow motion looking, slow motion walking, slow motion sex. If it's in the past, it's in slow motion, because we need to pad this runtime, and boy do they like to cut back to the past. A lot. The same scenes are shown multiple times, but more slow motion or different cuts are added to make it seem fresh or like it's hinting at a different meaning to the scene. It's not. This series could easily have been half its length, which is a big factor in why it's so boring. The show doesn't trust the audience to remember a flashback or event that happened barely half an episode or even a few minutes ago, but is also desperate to fill out its runtime. Story. The murder mystery plot was incredibly frustrating. Occasionally, Ingrid will make giant and quick leaps to conclusions that will turn out to be right, but then she also will take episodes to realise very obvious facts. She's doing the most investigating because she doesn't expect the police force to act quick enough before she gets hurt. Something that sometimes rings true and would have been far more interesting to fill the runtime with, instead of the excessive flashbacks and slow motion. Now I want a good television thriller that focuses on the limitations and frustrations of the legal and police system in the UK. Thank you for whetting my appetite, then taking the plate away, killing kind. Here's an example of one of Ingrid's many logical jumps to push the plot forward. This is from the first episode. The marketing has a heavy focus on the red umbrella Ingrid uses. It's on the poster, it's a focal point of the opening credits, and the camera stares at it meaningfully when Ingrid offers it to Belinda. Even though offering it is a little strange because Ingrid would presumably want an umbrella to go home with, but whatever. Anyway, when Ingrid finds out Belinda died, it takes her about a nanosecond to fixate on the fact Belinda was using her umbrella, and therefore someone was actually trying to kill Ingrid, not Belinda. This was not about Belinda. It had to be about Ingrid. She argues to D.I. Winstanley that it was a case of mistaken identity. I have to add, this umbrella was never highlighted to be a key aspect of Ingrid's aesthetic or significant in any way to her. And the attacker would have had to ignore Belinda's ethnicity and size in assuming it was Ingrid, which everyone else also fails to point out when Ingrid insists this is what happened, despite disproving another mistaken identity later on by using body language and gait on CCTV footage.
So whoever's doing this, they wanted Belinda. They didn't mistake her for me.
There's no image of the face they're clever enough to steer clear. And it doesn't look like Webster. Different height, gait.
In fact, the show wants us to agree with Ingrid's conclusion until it is, shockingly, disproven in episode 3. But don't worry, because Ingrid is right in that it still is all about her. From the first episode, the fact that John is so clearly sowing seeds of doubt in Ingrid's mind about who to trust was the biggest red flag, but still, Ingrid goes along with it. I had to laugh when each episode Ingrid had someone new to accuse and then got increasingly mad that police wouldn't immediately investigate every lead she had investigating herself. Like, I get it, your life is literally in danger. But the speed at which she would flip to a new theory was like whiplash. The script was awful. I have never been pulled out of a scene so quickly as when the characters were constantly, needlessly referencing their relationships and histories with each other.
I rejected you. You wanted to punish me.
You've been serious, Ingrid.
I just wanted one evening with my fiancé where one of us wasn't working.
Actually, it was the last thing I wanted to do in the world, follow my father into the law, and now here I am, married to a bloody barrister as well.
I was desperate to become a lawyer.
I remember all the truth and justice nonsense he spouted at the pupillage interview. Ingrid, you're making a name for yourself as a killer advocate who can work miracles for her clients. So I am telling you as your wise mentor to do it.
Who came all the way down to London for you after everything fell apart? Moved you around the corner when you had no one else?
Yeah, that would be you.
There's a reason you never told anyone but Belinda and me about what really happened between you both.
Yeah, because it was no one else's business.
What about Mark? It was his business. He still has no idea, right?
Flora and I only slept together once is a really pathetic excuse. And I know you were dealing with a lot with the harassment and Webster. And that was really intense. But this is on me. If it wasn't for me, Flora would still be alive.
This was especially egregious considering just how many times the show relies on flashbacks to tell its story, which were definitely not needed because everything was spelled out so often. Until, of course, it wasn't. Conveniently, when Ingrid asks a pretty big question,
How did you know where I was?
Look, we started during the trial, me and him. Building the case, I got to know her.
the answer doesn't seem to matter because it might give answers that are too important or remove a red herring from the narrative.
Did you try to kill me? Did you try to kill me?
I would never do that.
I get this may be nitpicky, but when John replied he didn't want to hurt Ingrid, it felt clear to me he did intend to harm her home and the other people in it. Like, that wasn't a straight answer, Ingrid. Aren't you a lawyer? Same thing when DS Nash appears in her hotel room. Like, how the hell did he find her? And how did he get into her hotel room? It's a small detail, but when you're writing a murder mystery with a barrister and police officers central to the plot, these details stand out. For all of Ingrid's conclusions and theory jumps, it really annoyed me when she didn't confront John for clearly lying and stirring up crap when he said that Flora's dad was trying to get Ingrid's address. Ingrid immediately visits Flora's parents, who seem to have somewhat forgiven her unintentional involvement in Flora's death in the house fire, meaning John was lying and trying to mess with Ingrid's mind. But this never comes up again. She discusses other iffy leads with him regularly, but I guess this one blip didn't matter. I had to roll my eyes for the amount of times Ingrid would insist to John she never wanted to see him again and to stay away from her. And then one of them would reach out to the other, and it was like that previous scene never happened. Like it was all for drama. Cough, cough, because it was. It's exhausting because this series can't decide if it wants to be an over-the-top and fun melodrama, or a serious take on stalking, abuse, and the legal system. It was neither. Also, this moment genuinely made me laugh so much.
It's like you've not helped your sister. You've helped her ruin both of your lives.
Let him go.
It was so convenient and melodramatic and contributed absolutely nothing to the narrative of the show. They're so close to a breakthrough, but oh no, their biggest lead just died suddenly and tragically. There were so many plot points that didn't matter, just created to fill up space or create some false drama and emotion. John's ex being pregnant and losing her baby, Jake dying, Ingrid's endless theories and boring investigations. And that finale. Wow, it really felt like the writers wanted me to scream, "Yeah! Girl power! You get that abusive piece of crap!" Instead, I was thinking, this is so monologue-y and contrived. And it was so obvious someone would fall over the edge, just like how Emma faked her death. And I know Emma's mentally broken, but she still murdered Ingrid's friend and mentor because of her hatred for Ingrid's. Yet the cold and stoic Ingrid is suddenly a warm and sensitive person and is protective of Emma. So much so that she defends Emma in court months later. Again, this mentally unstable young woman murdered your friend and the wife of the head of chambers, but I guess we gotta have a happy ending for all the characters. It felt way too cheesy, especially as a push for us to see how much Ingrid has changed and grown from the events of the series, all wrapped up in like 5 minutes. So, what could be fixed? I'm just going to riff off a couple of things I think could have been changed to make this series go from terribly boring and underdeveloped to something vaguely reasonably a decent watch. Something I can watch with a glass of wine and come away thinking this isn't the most boring or ridiculous miniseries I've watched in recent years. Something that was not the killing kind. The villain. Give Colin Morgan more to do. He barely features in the second half of the show, and then his big mastermind turn is just laughable. Yes, his involvement was expected, but I just couldn't connect the crime with the person. We need to see more of his actual sinister nature, maybe even, dare I say it, with more flashbacks to how he treated Emma. Instead, the series tries to keep him off-screen as much as possible to, I suppose, make the audience question if he's actually a decent guy or not, which seems unlikely given his history of stalking, which Ingrid makes clear from the first episode and gives credence to Emma's case. Show him being evil! Put his character into question. Can a guy this cruel and manipulative really have changed? Does he genuinely love and care about Ingrid? Mess with the audience's perception of him as well. Make it sexy. Yeah, I mean it. Why do people like crime thrillers and the obsession genre? Well, because it can be exciting and sexy. Just look at You and Fatal Attraction. Sexuality is a big deal in both of those. They also involve infidelity and affairs and the scandalous allure that comes with that. The killing kind includes that too. And yet, we get 2 scenes of a sexual nature, one of which made me cringe so hard I almost had to fast forward the scene. Even while editing this video, I can't watch it. Then there's also a hotel room encounter that once again employed far too much slow motion and a reluctance from the two actors to even touch, despite their presumed passion for each other. Seriously, Ingrid, this is what you're throwing away your engagement for? Obviously, having two leads with next to no chemistry doesn't help. There was not a spark to be seen between the two, and this just made the affair and subsequent relationship all the more perplexing. Cut it in half. 3 one-hour episodes is all you need to tell the story. If you're desperate to have 6, make them half an hour. This series dragged. Cut half of Ingrid's red herrings, cut most of the unnecessary flashbacks, because, let's be real, a lot of the content is played on repeat and doesn't need to be shown. Incorporating more scenes of John being an actual abuser may help the runtime, and scenes in which we see the conflict between barristers and the police force would be more interesting, so why not include some of that?
John Webster will receive exactly the same advice as you when it comes to personal safety while we're investigating.
That's not enough.
Feel free to register a complaint with the Home Office about our lack of resources.
Conclusion. Okay, so in conclusion, I hate it. Okay, I'm kidding. It's not the worst show ever. It's just a huge drop in potential. I just can't get over how much they fumbled the bag. They basically had a perfect formula to copy in You, just switch up the location and perspectives. Colin Morgan doesn't need to play Joe Goldberg 2.0, but I know he could have put his own spin on it really well to fit the series if given the chance. And Ingrid should have been fleshed out to more than her job, especially within 6 hours of television. There was so much boring padding and fluff, it was such a waste of time. Just do better, please. That's my conclusion.